Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. Props. What is a prop? Well, loosely, it's any object that you use as part of a performance. And performances include speeches. Now, raise your hand. Do you regularly use props in your speeches? Kind of looking around here, and it's a bit of a mixed bag. Now, slides don't count, so you can't raise your hand just for using slides. So should you use props? It may be a personal style question, but there are many benefits to using props. Let's look at some of them now. First, props are concrete. If you think about it, speech is abstract. The idea or the process or the belief or even the words, they aren't in the room. Where props are real, you can see them, you can hold them, you can touch them, sometimes you can even hear them. If I wrote a book on table topics and I was giving a speech about it, showing that book simply makes it more real than just talking about the book. Props are unexpected. They're almost a lost art these days. The presentation world has gone so much to being digital slide dominated, death by PowerPoint, I call that using props, you will stand out from the average presenter. Another benefit, props can be emotional. They are visual with a shape and a size and a color, and by implication, even an aroma. They may evoke memories or trigger emotions, including laughter. Another benefit, props can facilitate drama. You can create drama or suspense with a hidden prop, and audiences always love surprises. And a prop can even be personified. An example is my friend here, Toto the Table Topics Terrier. Toto, can you say hi? Props require preparation, and that is a benefit. That's a good thing. Audiences appreciate that you're not just standing there winging it with your words. You made extra effort to provide value for them to bring that prop in and use it. And props are memorable. Audiences may not remember an individual sentence or a slide that you had, but they'll always remember the prop that you surprised them with. Those of you who are members know Rocky Sure. Rocky talked to me a couple months ago about a speech of mine that he remembered, which I couldn't imagine that he remembered it. But the reason he remembered it is because he remembered my squeaky dog toy. And the fact that I threw that across the room during my speech. And just that squeaky dog toy made the speech memorable so that he was remembering it a year and a half later. All right, so with those benefits, how do you choose a prop? Well, I mean, options are unlimited. Other than, well, will it fit in the room? Can you transport it to the venue? I mean, a backhoe would be a great prop, but it's pretty tough to get it into the building, and especially up on stage. But other checklist items, is it linked to and relevant to your message? Now, if I had written a book, which I featured in my recent tall tale, if I had written a book called Hack Your Way to Fame and Fortune, just talking about it is okay, but showing that book to everyone makes it real. So having that prop elevates the message, the impact of that book, whether it's real or not. One thing to think about with props is, could your prop be considered offensive? Now, we're in a political time right now, and I won't push on anyone's political beliefs, but I think you can agree that a MAGA hat is perfect for a Trump rally. but likely offensive at a League of Women Voters meeting. So know your audience and think a little bit about whether that prop would be appropriate for your audience. Next checklist, what will you do with it? If it's clothing, wear it yourself. That'll be the easiest way to show it. If it's a product, you might demonstrate its use. Let's say I was an electronics manufacturer and I was showing off the latest microphone in our product line. Showing the microphone and actually using the microphone would make it much more real and much more high impact than just talking about it. On the other hand, if I was using this microphone prop as part of a story about how I won the national karaoke contest, an appropriate end for that story, what would you do if you won the national contest? Well, you might do a mic drop, right? Again, makes a real solid punctuation to that story. In your checklist, is it an actual physical thing? Will you bring it with you? Or perhaps you bring it in metaphorically. Let's say you have a speech that you're talking about something, some global issue, and the fact that it's global is important. Well, you could use a globe. Certainly that brings the issue to the front. Now, is this particular globe a good prop? Depends on the context, and I'll get to that in just a minute. The answer might be yes, it might be no. Is your prop big enough? That is, can the audience see its details in the back row? All right, so here's a prop. Can you tell what that is? I'm guessing that if you squint really hard, you might be able to tell, oh, that's a case, a DVD case. But you probably can't read any of it. And you probably can't read it unless I get it like really up close to the camera. And even then it might be a little hard. Now, so this is not a great prop because you can't see the details. And in particular, if I were giving a speech in person, imagine you're in the back row of a hotel ballroom. Being able to understand what this even is probably going to be very difficult. So not necessarily a good prop because it's not big enough for the details that you'll be talking about. As well as, is it big enough? Is your prop small enough? Can you handle it? Can you manipulate it? Or is it too cumbersome? So I'll go back to the globe. In an online presentation, this is pretty cumbersome. This is like way too big. This is tough to handle, tough to show. Definitely not a great prop for an online presentation. However, if I were in a hotel ballroom or in a big auditorium and I had that setting on the stage next to me, then it might be appropriate because then it doesn't dominate the presentation and I don't have to juggle it around with it being so big. Again, is your prop small enough? Well, is it a surprise prop? That is, are you going to spring it on your audience? Well, here's an interesting prop. I just surprised it on you. So if I wanted to use my big cowboy hat as a prop, as a surprise in a particular speech, online, that works just fine. You didn't know that hat was there, and all of a sudden it appeared. However, can you imagine if you were in person trying to walk on stage and hide this? It would be really hard to do that. So the choice that you would be given would be to wear it right from the beginning, or to have it in your hand right from the beginning, and people would see it and you'd lose the element of surprise. So that's a decent prop online, probably not as good if you're in person, unless it's part of the overall story of your speech, and wearing it through the whole speech works. Another checklist item, maybe the most important one, does it add value to the presentation? Now these are my cool sunglasses, right? So is this a good prop? Well, Being cool isn't enough unless cool is your message. But if it's just you want to look cool while you're giving a speech about something else, probably not the best prop because it doesn't enhance your message as well. All right, so those are some ideas about how to choose a prop. Now, how do you use a prop? And there are actually three phases here. There's what you do before the speech, what you do during the speech, and what you do after you're done with the prop. So let's look first at how do you use the prop before you hit stage. First rule, make a plan. Do you start with the prop, which is maybe the best for clothing because then you don't have to hide it. But will you come on with the prop clearly visible? Do you just hold it up? Or will you throw it or roll it or squeak it? Have a plan for that. Will it be part of a demonstration? That is, as with that microphone, might you be showing some of the features of that in a product demonstration? Will you be pointing at the features while you're talking? Will you feature that prop for 10 seconds or 10 minutes? So your plan is going to be very different depending on how long that prop is part of your speech. And then when will you stop using it? The answer might be you won't, and you'll carry it off stage in full view. But that all needs to be part of your plan. Once you have a plan, the next thing before you hit stage is rehearse the plan. Can you get it out of the bag or the box? That microphone I shared comes in this plastic bag. Now, if the microphone were in the bag and I carried it on stage and I wrestled around trying to get the microphone out of the bag, I just lost my audience. Make sure you can get to the prop easily without any distractions. Might you drop it? Well, who knows with that globe, I might. Will your prop do what you want it to do? If you're doing a product demonstration, I came out of the high-tech world and I've seen a lot of failed demos. If you're in high tech, you probably have too. Even Steve Jobs at Apple sometimes would come on and have a product demonstration that didn't quite work. Well, rehearse, rehearse, rehearse so that you're sure when that prop gets used for your demonstration that it will do exactly what you want it to do. Also, before using, again, if it's a surprise prop, will you smuggle it into the room? I mean, you don't want to give away the surprise. If you smuggle it into the room, make sure you can easily locate it. If the audience can't see it, where might it be? If it's tucked into your back pocket in some way, can you get it out of your back pocket without it being unwieldy to do that and distracting from your speech? All right, so those are the things to look at before you hit stage. Now, while you're on stage, what are some of the things about using a prop? If it's a surprise prop, you might build anticipation. You might gesture toward it. You might hint at what it is. I have a magical hat on my right. Can you guess what it looks like? Even play a guessing game. But then when you reveal the prop, use some dramatic flair. During my recent table topic, there's a spot where I have a voice come on that says, Jim Emery, you just won 5 Nobel Prizes. What are you going to do next? And what did I do? I went, I'm going to Disney World. So you see the flair of bringing that hat out, putting it on, and showing it off really accentuates the use of the prop. One cardinal rule is make your prop easy to see. This is a nice little prop, a first place trophy. If I'm in a big hall, I might have to hold it up high for people actually to see it in the back row. Hold it steady. If it's moving all around like this, it's a little hard to tell what it is. On the other hand, if it has different sides to it that are necessary to your message, make sure that people see the different sides. Give everybody a good look. So if you're in a big room, walk around to different spots. Maybe you walk over to this part of the stage and you show it here, and you walk back to the center and you show it here, and you walk over here and you show it here. Make sure everyone can see it, and don't rush that. Otherwise, you lose the value of the prop. If you're online, make sure the lighting works with it. I don't know if I can quite demonstrate with this prop, but if you look at particular angles, you get glare off of this prop. So make sure that the lighting is appropriate for that prop. Now, you've used the prop, everybody loved it. What are you going to do after you used it? It's pretty simple. Put it away. Preferably out of sight and definitely out of reach. Out of sight, that gets the audience back looking at you instead of the prop that's no longer relevant to your message. Out of reach prevents you from fidgeting with it and distracting the audience as well. So you're done with that prop, put it away. The hat that I had, for example, I put it back on the rack. It's out of the way. I don't touch it. I don't have to look at it. After using it, and this maybe applies more to commercial kinds of presentations, you might be tempted to pass it around in the audience. I've seen that work, but for the most part, I would advise against it for two reasons. One, if you think about the prop moving through the audience, when that prop gets to the fourth person in the third row, what is that person and probably the two people on either side of them doing? They're looking at the prop, and they're maybe even mumbling to each other about the prop. They're not watching you, they're not listening to you. So passing it around through the audience distracts audience members from the rest of your presentation. So one reason probably not to. Certainly passing it around, it could get damaged. If it has value, that means you're going to have to buy another one, which you maybe don't want to do. Or it could just get lost. Again, something that you probably hadn't counted on. But there is an alternative. If you really want your audience members to have a closer look at your prop, invite them to come take a look and meet with you afterwards, and you can show it to them. That allows you to take the prop, show it to them, talk all the wonderful things about it, and it will seem like a bonus opportunity to those people. And it gives you the opportunity to talk with your audience, which is also a really good thing. So I'm going to move now to some examples of props in a variety of different contexts. We're going to start by looking at props in championship speeches in the Toastmasters World Championships. The first here is a fellow named Darren Tay. Darren was the champion in 2016. He gave a speech about bullying, and in the first 10 seconds, he put those white underwear briefs on over his pants. This was 2016, so now 6 years later, I had to go back and remind myself what the speech was about, but that image of Darren in his underwear will stay with me forever. A truly memorable prop, and he sprang it on the audience right at the beginning to get their attention. Terrific image. Dhananjaya Hetarachi, I think is how you pronounce it, was the winner in 2014. He had a simple prop. It was one beautiful red rose. And he used that rose metaphorically to talk about his life. And the first part of his speech was sort of a downward spiral of his life. And he used the rose as the image by picking the petals off and dropping them into a wastebasket on the stage, petal by petal by petal, as he talked about the decline of his life. And at the end, he broke the rose completely and threw it into the wastebasket. Then, as often happens with inspirational speeches, he talked about a life change and how his life then improved and gradually got back on track. He then went over at the very end, reached in the wastebasket, and pulled out one fully formed, beautiful rose that represented what had happened in his life. Wonderful image, very simple prop. Mohammed Khatani won in 2015. Very interesting start. As soon as he was introduced, he pulled out a cigarette and a lighter, and he flicked his lighter, and he was going to light his cigarette, and you could hear the gasps in the audience. He got the attention of the audience really fast. He never actually lit it up. He put it away, and it was a good segue into his speech, which was about the importance of words. And then he bookended the speech, that prop use at the end, again, as memorable. So I'd seen this once before, and again, I remember the cigarette, didn't remember the speech. I had to go back what it was about, but I'll never get that image out of my mind. Pres Vassiliev in 2013. Now, if you look here, you say, so what's the prop? I mean, what's down on the floor there is just his suit coat folded up. That's not really a prop. He doesn't really use that. But he's bent over and he's doing something. If you've seen the speech, what he does is he talks about changing a tire by the side of the road. And what he has is he has his hands down on the jack, which is an image he's giving you. The jack isn't really there. But he cranks the jack so that he gets the car jacked up so that he can change the tire. He even adds squeaks to the jack because it's an old rusty jack. And in this case, although he doesn't have the physical prop, he really has a prop because he is so good at doing the pantomime. He's planted the seed of that prop in your mind. Have you seen props in district contests? Certainly have. And in fact, this club has some very interesting ones, which I'll share with you here. The 2022 Spring International Contest was won by our own Pete Totaro, who had a speech about magic tricks with his daughter. How do you do magic tricks without props? Pete's use of the props was excellent. He had the magical book that had the drawings that vanished and then came back, and all of that. To do that speech without the prop would have been nearly impossible. To do it with the prop made it very effective. Our own Rocky Schur, in his spring contest winning speech in District 6, talked about an image of breaking the chain of fear. And he used a very simple chain as his prop. And at least one version, I'm not sure if it was the finals, he broke the chain, the physical chain, as an image of breaking the chains of fear in the story. Again, very effective. Our own Sue, in her, I think this was the Tall Tales contest, talking about the Loch Ness Monster. Not only had the Loch Ness Monster and a cute little puppet, but she had her camera that had taken a picture of the Loch Ness Monster. That all made it more real for us, real in the Tall Tales sense, so that it popped off the screen to us by using that prop. If she had just talked about it, it wouldn't have been as strong. Again, our newest member, Petra Choradal, has a wonderful international speech that talks about seeing herself in the mirror. And just an elegant prop here, just a very simple handheld mirror, but she used it superbly. In fact, you can see in the picture here, she even holds it perfectly so that you can not only see the mirror, you can see her face in the mirror. An excellent use of a prop. Oh yeah, and then there's my Tall Tales. You want props on overload? This speech hasn't won district yet, I'm hopeful, but it has made it through division and will be in district in the spring. Had 8 costume changes and 12 props, and it was actually 16 props if you count each of the Nobel Prize medals in that particular scene. Did the props help? I think so. If I had just talked about these stories without the props, it wouldn't have been nearly as effective. And the fact that each little scene had its own prop, I think made it just that much more interesting. So I had fun with that. This was an experiment for me in use of props and costumes. All right, so outside of Toastmasters, do you see props used as well? Well, I'm sure most of you watch TED Talks from time to time. There have been some notable TED Talks that have used props. One of the most viewed TED Talks of all time is a speech delivered by Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor. She talks about what happened to her brain when she had a stroke. And she actually uses what's in her hand there is a real human brain. That's why she has the glove on. She shows it to the audience. She shows the different lobes and talks about, in my stroke, this happened over on this part of the brain, and what that did to her mental functioning. It was very effective just seeing the brain there and being able to talk to it. Now, she didn't use the brain for all 18 minutes of her TED Talk. That would have been a bit much. She had an assistant that brought it on and then an assistant that took it off. So she knew how to get rid of it when it was time, but very effective. Bill Gates gave a talk about malaria and the impact of mosquitoes in spreading malaria. In one of the, maybe the scariest uses of a prop, if you can see it here, what he has is a big glass jar. Well, that big glass jar was teeming with live mosquitoes. And he took the lid off and he spread the mosquitoes around the room. Now that got the attention of the audience. He immediately had to make sure that he guaranteed none of the mosquitoes were affected with anything. But the use of that mosquito really made the story real for the audience. Now, what about in the business world? Do you see props in the business world? Well, for sure. One of the most notable is a fellow named Ron Popeil. Any of you know who Ron Popeil is? He's the founder of a company called Ronco. If you've never heard of Ron or Ronco, I'll bet you have heard of the Vegematic. It slices and dices and does all those wonderful things. Or perhaps the Popeil Pocket Fisherman, which he has in his hand in this particular photo here. Without props, Ron doesn't have a story. With props, they are the story. So very effective in doing demonstrations with his props. Great way to use them. You can even think about going one step further using props as brands. There are a number of people who have decided that props were so effective they made them into their personal brand. If you've ever seen Minnie Pearl on the Grand Ole Opry, that hat with the sales tag is her brand. There's no mistaking that. Johnny Carson used to do Karnak the Magnificent every couple months, and that incredible hat with the plume and the cape and the cards with the answers to the questions were there, made it incredibly memorable. So that every time he brought that back with that costume, it was fun all over again. Half of the fun was just the costuming. Larry King. You see those suspenders? Have you ever seen Larry King without those suspenders? I suspect not. Now they changed colors. They might have been red or green or these blue here, but those suspenders were as much who Larry King was as anything that you can imagine. And then probably the most recognizable costume prop, well, the Pope. There's no mistaking who that is. And you don't even have to look at the face to know that's the Pope. Now, as I talked about earlier, I had used Toto in the Table Topics contest. So I thought, gee, would that be a good brand, using Toto in Table Topics? The answer ended up being no. It was a fun experiment. I used Toto in 2 club contests, in an area contest, and in a division contest. I came in dead last in the 2 club contests. I won the area contest, and I wasn't in the top 3, which meant it failed in the division contest. Now, why is that? Well, if you think about the rules up front, is the prop appropriate to my message? There's really no way of knowing that ahead of time with the Table Topics. Did I have a plan for the use of the prop? Well, until I heard the question, there was no way to build a plan other than just some general use about having him bark or something. So that was hard too. And if I didn't have a plan, how could I practice the plan? So Toto was fun, but I think we're going to retire him from table topics use. You never know, you might find his way back to a real speech though. Is a dog a bad prop though? No. A friend of mine, Chris Heater, is the head of the Wild Institute, and she actually uses her own dog as a prop because what she talks about is team building and leadership development, and she uses dog sled teams as the way to describe that. What makes a good leader dog? What makes a good team? And so she actually uses her dog, takes it on stage with her, lets it wander around the audience. It's the mellowest dog on the planet, so that's not a problem. But people remember her as the dog lady. So those are some interesting examples that hopefully will give you some idea of the potential for using props. So let me summarize. Props have many benefits. They're concrete, they're unexpected, they're dramatic, and they are memorable. Choose an appropriate prop that fits your message and adds value. Before you use a prop, make a plan and rehearse the plan. During your use of the prop, you might build some anticipation. Make it sure it's easy to see. And after you're done, put it away. If you want to, you can invite the audience to come see it afterwards. We talked about a few memorable uses of props, and maybe I've planted the seed that making a prop your brand might be something to think about. So props have so much potential. I hope you're now inspired to be creative and paint your own personality with props. Madam Toastmaster.